Welcome to the Small Biz 101 podcast, a show for big dreamers who want to start or grow their small businesses. And now, your host, long-term small business owner and strategic business coach, Connie Weitzel.
Hello, and happy to have you here listening to the Small Biz 101 podcast, where we discuss all you need to know to start or grow your own small business. Now, we currently are in the middle of a series discussing how to figure out what type of small business is right for you. In my last episode, I discussed the importance of really knowing yourself before you decide on the business that you'd like to start. So looking at your likes, your dislikes, your skills, knowledge, your passion, even your curiosities, and your strengths. All of these, having a deep knowledge of all of these and incorporating the best of these into your business is one of the foundations for a successful small business. Now, I mentioned in the last episode also that one of my favorite tools for understanding oneself deeply is an assessment tool called the Enneagram. So today, in the second episode of the Small Biz 101 podcast, I have a special treat for you on this topic. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a woman who is an expert at helping people discover their Enneagram type and helping them understand what they stand for and what they believe in. This person has worked for more than 25 years with influential clients and leadership teams from a wide range of Fortune 500, government, nonprofit, entrepreneurial, and small business ventures. She is certified through the Enneagram in Business and the Martha Beck Institute for Life Coaching. And she also is trained in positive psychology in the area of strength-based living with the VIA Institute. You may recall if you heard the last episode that I talked about the VIA Character Strength Survey. Another great tool to work with that our guest is very knowledgeable about. So I am thrilled to introduce you to our guest today, the founder and CEO of Renaissance Leader, Lisa Alessi. Welcome, Lisa. It's such a pleasure to have you here today.
Oh, thanks, Connie. It's my honor to be on this podcast. It's great. And thank you for inviting me.
So, Lisa, let's just dive right into this. I described the Enneagram briefly, and as we've talked about before, I have worked with it in my work as a business coach. I think it's phenomenal. My clients who have used it think it is just spot on. But when I talk about it, I have a hard time describing what it is. Would you first share with the audience here, what is the Enneagram?
Many times when we're trying to describe this particular system, it's good to compare it to others that people are already familiar with, like the Myers-Briggs or FIRO-B or DISC systems. There's so many different assessment tools out there, and if anybody's worked within an organization, they probably are familiar. So Enneagram is really a personality system, and what I love about it that separates it from the others is that it really gets at the foundational why we do what we do. So it really is getting at those inner drivers and inner motivations that some of the other assessments, they're all synergistic. So a lot of time that question comes up of, well, I've already done Myers-Briggs. Why would I want to do the Enneagram? Is that it's just going to take you probably a few layers deeper in your understanding of yourself and that self-awareness, as well as the self-awareness of how other people operate. And really the beautiful thing is that I think this is what, when I'm talking with people about it and they're like, oh, this is great, is that it really allows you to take a peek under the hood. So, you often see that symbol or image of the iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg is what we're consciously aware of. And what the Enneagram does is it highlights a lot of the patterns of the way we think and feel and act in the world and how we all perceive reality differently. And it allows us to take a look and it articulates some of these patterns that are below the line, right? Below the tip. Yep. And it raises them up to the surface so that you can do something. It's like, oh, I do that. Oh, yes. And there are words for it. Like, I get it. And then the other beautiful thing about the Enneagram is because there's so much literature on it, and there's lots of books and articles and thought leaders in the area and topic, is that there's always a pathway of growth. So it's a really fantastic developmental tool as well.
I was at a retreat this past weekend with, are you familiar at all with Cheryl Richardson?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, she's been around for a long time. Her main focus is on self-care. There must have been about a half-hour discussion about the Enneagram because she loves it. And what I realized in that discussion, though, I guess I had always thought that it was available through one group. I had always gone and done the test through the EnneagramInstitute.com, but people that were talking about other resources for the Enneagram as well. So are there a number of ways to take this survey, or does it all come down to one?
Well, that raises actually a really good point, is that, so there is an assessment that's available on the Enneagram Institute. There are also some kind of tests that you can buy in some of the books that are available to walk you through and say, are you this, are you that, and to provide the big picture. There are 9 different types that show up with the Enneagram. Ennea stands for 9 in Greek, and gram is a symbol. So it's a very visual tool as well. And some of those thought leaders and some of my mentors have talked about it as being a map to the soul, which I love, and I think it's just a wonderful way to consider it. It is a really strong developmental tool and a way to lead us to greater ease in our lives, in our work, and in everything we do. But the point about there are lots of different ways that you can go about learning the Enneagram. The most effective that I have found is experientially. So when I walk someone through the Enneagram, I provide them with some information, and then we talk it through, and we really kind of develop a level of self-awareness. Is that you? Does this show up? How does this work for you? What resonates about this? So it's really a real exploration of self-discovery, and people tend to learn the system a lot better that way. There are lots of great books that are available, if you want to do the self-guided kind of process. The Wisdom of the Enneagram is one of my go-to favorites, and it's been around for quite a while. That's by the authors of Don Rizzo and Russ Hudson, who are with the Enneagram Institute. Don Rizzo has actually passed away, but Russ continues to do that work. The other go-to book that I really love is called The Complete Enneagram. And I was just at a workshop last weekend with the author, Beatrice Chestnut. And I would say this is a more modernized version of really breaking down the types and the subtypes, which is another layer of complexity, and really honing in some of those patterns. So she's taken this work and gotten much more specificity with it. And so another phenomenal way, those are 2 books. In terms of programs or courses or workshops, the Enneagram Institute does a lot of that work. Beatrice Chestnut, who I was just talking about, is doing a number of different training programs now, as well as Holland Palmer and Dave Daniels with the Enneagram and the Narrative. So those are kind of 3 of and there's many, many others. Those are kind of the go-to when you're starting to learn the system. They've got really those introductory models, and a lot of them offer experiential panels and ways to learn it so you can actually see it 3D.
For our listener, if you go to the show notes for this episode, I will have links to all of these resources that Lisa has just mentioned, because they sound very comprehensive and unique in different ways. So it seems like some might be good for one reason, some for another. Would you say that?
Yes, and the application of the Enneagram is so interesting. So it was really, back in the day, it's been around for a very long time. The ancients used to use it as a tool to teach us how to live our lives and to do it with greater levels of well-being and joy, right? So as a guide, nowadays it's been applied in the business setting. So another mentor and trainer of mine is Ginger Lapid-Bogda, the Enneagram in Business. The Enneagram in Business is a really powerful site, has a ton of resources and information, and very much applied in the workplace setting. There's people who specialize in applying it in parenting, applying it in relationships. Pretty much every application is there. And so, it just kind of varies in where you're coming from and how you want to use it. A lot of people are using it either for self-development or to help them in their workplace settings.
Related to that, tell me more about how, because I know you work with a lot of business leaders, you work with small business owners. How do you see this tool helping someone, say for our topic right now, we're talking about how to find your ideal business, or even if you already have a small business. Can you give maybe some examples or tell us a little more about how the Enneagram can support someone in those situations?
So I mentioned a little bit earlier about the fact that the Enneagram articulates patterns. It puts words to things, and you're like, oh, yeah, I do that. So in terms of, deciding what type of business to start or, what area to focus in when people are doing that kind of level of exploration, there's a few different ways that someone could approach it. And as a coach, I'm sure you have found, Connie, that, a lot of times we take for granted what comes easy to us. And we tend to want to make it harder. But the Enneagram really highlights a lot of those strengths. What are the things that we're really good at? And so for some, it would be very service orientation. For others, it's about efficiency and helping people organize things. Or some people are really good about improving. They focus on, their focus attention is going on what needs to be improved about this thing? How do things need to be maintained? Or how can I make things sustainable? Other people are more focused on risk. They really love that risk-taking. It's exhilarating for them. And knowing that each of the different types have different motivations and these inner drivers. And so when you look at that, you can use it as a threshold to say, I really am good at that. Or, I really do love that. And I really want to do more in this area.
You talked a little bit about how people react like, oh, that is me. Can you talk a little bit more about the reactions? Both, I imagine you get both positive and maybe even some negative ones too. I know when I went through my profile, and although I agreed with them, it was kind of tough to see some of the things that you need to work on just so laid out there in writing for you. What do you normally find people's responses are to this?
It probably runs the gamut. A lot of people who come to me are really, really dedicated to their own self-development and self-awareness, and they're really looking to amp up their level of self-mastery, meaning becoming aware of things that are holding them back. So that's a huge piece of work that I do with folks. So I may have a little bit of a skewed population of people that I'm working with that are really, they want to dive into this stuff. So probably skewed a little bit more on the positive. They just eat this stuff up. I would say that sometimes, and I think this is really an important point to make too, is some of the earlier materials in the Enneagram were really focused and zeroed in on psychosis or negative behavior, just like psychology used to be all abnormal. All the research was being done on abnormal psych. And then when Martin Seligman came out with the character strengths work, it was really, he really wanted to build out this body around positive psychology. So the Enneagram, I would say, would be parallel, is that the original stuff could be a little harsh and kind of difficult to take, and people could get really easily turned off to it because it was very negative. Although sometimes very accurate, but a little hard to take. Some of the newer materials that have come out, starting with the Wisdom of the Enneagram, the Complete Enneagram that I was talking with Beatrice Chestnut, those are all taking it from the higher side of kind of looking at the growth areas. So not neglecting or ignoring some of the challenging patterns that will clearly be revealed, but also going to, and this is where you can go with it. And I think it's really important to have that balance when you're presenting this so people really can see themselves more holistically. Okay, well, I do that, and this is a strength. And when I overdo that strength, it becomes my Achilles heel, right? And it's that kind of pivot. And so the Enneagram helps you understand that. And it also helps you see the way we are perceiving reality that is really very much based on these inner drivers. So an example of that would be, so you and I could go to be in a meeting or a party or a social interaction of some sort and walk away, and we'll debrief afterwards, and you could have completely different take than I would, and to the point that you're like, were we at the same meeting? And that's perception of reality, right? You're taking in information. It may be the same, information that we're both taking in, but it gets mixed up with our experiences and our feelings and our emotions and past stuff. And so it all gets interpreted, and out pops our perception of reality. And so the Enneagram helps us understand that in ourselves. So it really helps us develop that level of compassion for ourselves, as well as helping us understand where other people are coming from and how it may be their perception is different, and really develop that level of understanding and compassion for them too.
What you were saying about the interactions and having that discussion, say, after the meeting and seeing two different perspectives. I'm curious, do you think that once a person has done some research into the Enneagram, and of course they know their own profile that comes through, but do you think with that knowledge you can also gain some insight into what Enneagram type the person you're working with is without having gone through the analysis? Are some of those traits pretty obvious?
Yes. I would say that, and this kind of depends on the person. If a person is very much in tune with reading other people and, kind of really picking out, they really zero in. Some folks are more in tune with this than others, looking at people's strengths and their weaknesses, kind of areas of development, issues, challenges, that kind of thing. Then for those folks who are tuned into that, it's easier for them to pick out someone else's type than their own sometimes, right? Because we're way too close to our own patterns a lot of the times that we can't necessarily always see it. Some people are a little bit better than others, but yes, I would say it's very easy for others to pick out the personality types of other folks on their team or people in their family, or absolutely, there's no question. And often the question that comes up once people have typed themselves, they figured out what type they are, they will immediately, if they're in the dating relationship kind of thing, is who should I be dating, right? What type should I be dating? Or, and some people use it also, organizations use it. So Salesforce.com actually uses the Enneagram as a way in the hiring process. However, when they use it, it's not necessarily for a screening tool of we want this particular type, or only this, it's a technology company, so we want the knowledge seekers, and that's the Enneagram 5 kind of type. What they're using it for is actually to look at people's ability to work in team dynamics and their own level of self-awareness and their ability to work and interact with others. And that is the answer with relationships. It's not necessarily one type is better than the other. It's usually very much about where are you compatible in level of self-awareness? Because that's when we have our best and strongest relationships, is when it's kind of on the same level.
It's interesting. You mentioned one of the types, and I think the way these 9 types are named is really interesting. Like, just for an example, for me, my primary type is 9, which, and I know there are different names with different programs, but with the wisdom of the Enneagram, they call that the peacemaker. Mm-hmm. And as soon as I read that, I thought, oh gosh, just the name alone describes how I'm trying to mediate between people and I want peace. I'm not a great conflict person. So the names are fantastic.
Yes, and Ginger Lapid-Bogda, who's with the Enneagram in business, she has a really great app, a phone app. You can get an Android version, or there's an iPhone version or iPad version called Know Your Type. And she actually has these really great cards for each of the types. This is another way to go through the assessment for yourself. And it has pictures as well as the kind of key core drivers. It'll have questions that it asks you to go through. And it's really keying in on sometimes the image and the words, like you're talking about peacemaker, sage, those kinds of things, as well as the questions that can help you eliminate, nope, not that, not that, not that. That sometimes the nuances aren't captured in the assessment that you might take online. That's another resource.
Oh, I can't wait to check that out. I wasn't aware of that one. That would be really interesting.
And I really like that app. Ginger worked with Genentech, which is a biotech company out here in San Francisco, who introduced the Enneagram throughout their organization. And they really wanted something to further people's knowledge. So they developed the technology behind the app, and she did all the content. And there's like 2 volumes of book kind of level material in there. And it really helps you zero in on each of the types. So it'll walk you through those different type cards that we were just talking about. But it'll also help you interactions with others. So if you're a 9 and I'm a 3, it will actually provide you, okay, so here's where we see eye to eye, here's where we have challenges, and here's what you can do about that. In terms of conflict, there's another section that will actually say, okay, so if you're having conflict with a particular type, say you're having conflict with an 8 or something, the Enneagram type 8, and you know that, and you can see those patterns in another coworker, then you can look there to get some suggestions on how you might even tweak the dynamic of your conversations or your interactions so that you can really improve the situation. So another powerful way.
You've mentioned so many benefits of this. Do you think you can narrow it down? Could you identify what you think is the most beneficial aspect of the Enneagram to someone who has their own small business?
Yes, absolutely. So I would say one of and there's so many, but the thing that I think is super beneficial is really identifying the conditions that people need to create for themselves in their own businesses to thrive. So you can really get an understanding of who I am, here's what I'm really good at, here's where I struggle, and then here's where I need support. I think that is super, super helpful. And then if, you are someone who is a systems and process type of person, you know what you're good at. You may need to bring in someone that is really good at the, brainstorming creative side of the business. So it can help you in rounding out what you need in staffing terms. And definitely the other big thing is helping you understand those interpersonal dynamics, like we were just talking about, whether that be with clients, with your customers, with support staff, obviously. Those are all things that you can, even just knowing what your type is and having a hunch of how someone might be behaving, even if you don't know their type, looking at ways you might adjust that communication, like I was talking about a little bit earlier, that can be super helpful. It helps in knowing who to hire, essentially, right? When you know your strengths and you know where you need that support, it can definitely point you in that direction. There's also a lot of material on leadership styles. So a lot of times people really equate leadership with that command and control type of personality, and they think, I'm not a leader. And yet there are 9 different ways we lead, and that's the Enneagram has really spells it out. Some people are really good at collaboration and consensus building. That would be very much the 9, kind of a very nurturing, collaborative kind of way of leading. Whereas other people are very, like the 3, which is what I am, are very much about getting results. Getting to what do you really want here and what do we need to get there and how are we going to get it? How are we going to do it to get to the end result? So knowing that about ourselves, that leadership style and owning. Sometimes people have a hard time owning their leadership style because they think, I really should be more direct, or I should have greater influence over here, or I need to double down, or those kinds of things. And it really helps you kind of understand, okay, this is where I am, this is what I'm good at, this is where I have some issues. I own that. I'm not going to hide it. And here's how people can support me. Another area is around giving feedback. I think probably one of the difficult conversations, you were talking about conflict a little bit earlier. A lot of times that is very, regardless of your type, a lot of us are challenged with having some of those difficult conversations. And there is a lot of information out there on tweaking it just a little bit away, different way, like those interpersonal dynamics, and giving feedback in ways that people can hear it, right? And they can really absorb it and not take it personal, right? It's not personalized. So that's another thing. And then the team dynamic interplay of understanding who's on my team, how, I can use that to the best utilization to get things done, to perform better, to be efficient, those kinds of things. The Enneagram helps in all those areas.
You were talking about these companies like Salesforce and Genentech. Are you seeing that the Enneagram is becoming more well-known recently? Or is this something where it really has been popular for a while and it's just me? I'm just relatively new to it.
It's an interesting thing. It's my impression that we are getting, you hear a lot of words about the collective consciousness, right? Especially with this election that's going on, right? And so people know within organizations that we need to move away from these patriarchal command and control type models that have really been very prevalent in our commercial sector in particular, but even in our nonprofit sectors. And as we move into the greater good, organizations that are really about doing good work in the world, they can also be revenue generators, but they really have that common mission, purpose, cause, or any of the social change initiatives that are out there. We realize that we have to think differently and we have to become more socially conscious and more aware. And so I think that the Enneagram is becoming more of a primary tool because we know we can't just do it the way we've always done it. So if I were to contrast this to the Myers-Briggs, I think the Myers-Briggs is very helpful in understanding behaviors, but it's not always getting at why we do what we do. And so that's why this is taking it a few layers deeper, and it's a different way of approaching things. Yeah, I think it's becoming more prevalent, to answer your question.
Okay. One thing that came to my mind is when I've worked with it through the Wisdom of the Enneagram book, there's a section where it talks about levels of development and where it ranges from 1 to 9. I think that part of it is a really helpful tool for seeing where you are now and helping you evaluate as you move up the scale and become more and more effective as this particular type. I love that they provide that scale for that. Do you ever use those levels of development in your work?
I think that's one thing that I give anybody I walk through the Enneagram. I usually give the summary section to that in the Enneagram and the Institute so that they can take a look at the levels. And there's 9, there's 3 kind of in the highest level of the high side of of our awareness. There's the middle, which there's 3 there as well. And then there's 3 that are really down. They're more the really challenging behaviors of any personality particular type. And so most of us, we're in autopilot a lot of the time. So we're really falling into that middle section, right? Where it's kind of average level of awareness. And even if we can move in and out of some of those levels of awareness on a daily basis, it's not like once you achieve the high side that you don't ever fall back down into some of the other more challenging patterns. It's really predicated on stress. Because stress is what brings out some of our defense mechanisms. It brings out some of those coping strategies that we learned at a very young age, and we can move in and out of it. And one of the things that I think people feel like, well, the Dalai Lama or Gandhi or some of those that we equate as being very highly spiritually enlightened, right? It's to realize that even they go back and down in between these levels. It's not like once you achieve enlightenment or this high level that your stuff isn't going to come up, put it that way, right? So what I think that is really helpful about those levels is for one, to say, okay, wow, I can go there. Here's where I am now, or here's where I tend to gravitate to. Wow, I can go down there, but it doesn't happen very often. Or, whoa, I haven't gone there yet. Maybe I never will. And okay, here's the path, right? Here's the growth. Here's when I'm really in tune. Here's where I'm really grounded. And knowing those different levels, it really helps us develop that level of self-awareness. It helps us remain grounded and have that compassion for ourselves when we are stressed. Because it's not about eradicating, some of these behaviors. It's about working with them, essentially. Mm-hmm. And, and really, I think it helps us know ourselves better, much more deeply in who we are as a person, what our triggers are, the essence of how we show up when we're challenged, but also when we're really calm and relaxed and the highest side of where we can go. Russ Hudson just recently did a whole series of videos on the Enneagram and the Institute for each of these descriptions of the types where he's really focusing in on the high side, which I love. And it's like 1.5 minutes for each type pattern. So those are really wonderful ways to learn about that as well.
Can you just go to his website and access those videos, or do you look them up on YouTube? How do you find those?
It's right on the Enneagram Institute website.
I noticed they changed that website.
They just redid it.
It looks beautiful. Okay, good. Oh, well, that's another great tool that I'll be sure to include in the show notes. Actually, and I hope you don't mind, but as you were going through, I thought maybe it might be helpful to our audience to go through an example of how it can work with a specific person. So would you mind just taking a couple of moments and talking with me about my type and how you see that related to owning a small business? Like I said, I'm the 9. And then, and I'd also like you to talk about, because I know we also have what they call the wing. So it's like, it's almost like a secondary profile, right?
Mm-hmm. And the subtypes are the other one, yeah.
I'm the peacemaker, and then my wing is number 1, the reformer.
So in terms of how that might work, I think probably I'm trying to think of as a small business owner and specifically as a coach. I think actually there's a lot of 9s that are attracted to coaching. They really like to connect with people. They really like to empower people because the 9 is really very much about helping. Everybody has a voice and everyone needs to have their voices heard. So that's where that desire to have consensus building and collaboration. And so there's a strong desire for 9s to empower people, to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to talk and to use their skills and their gifts and to share and to be a part of decision making and so forth. And so you're in a beautiful profession for your Enneagram type.
That's good. So in a way, that helps validate a decision about the work that you're in. That's really interesting.
Absolutely. One of the challenges for 9s is taking action on their own needs and their own priorities. Because one of the instant reactionary measures for a 9 is when there's conflict or there's tension in a group or whatever, there's a desire to not rock the boat, create harmony, and put the needs of the group ahead of their own, essentially. How this can help for someone in small business is to recognize that it really is important, especially as a small business owner, to put my needs and my priorities and make sure that you're taking what they call inspired action. So it feels good. It doesn't feel like I have to, but it's like it's a must do because I want to do this and it's important for my work and important for these people and important to do all this to help people flourish in their businesses. So to keep your eye focused on why you're doing what you're doing. And that helps stay focused and remove away from the inertia that you might feel of putting your needs ahead of anyone else's. It's like, I say the path of growth for the 9 is to recognize that you can make your needs and everyone else's. It's not an either or.
Well, that makes sense too, because, and maybe that was why I was at that retreat this weekend that had a big focus on self-care. Now that's more on the personal end of things, but maybe there was that attraction to doing that because I realized that that's part of what I need to incorporate into my life, both personally and professionally.
One of the other things for 9, so each, not to go really spend a lot of time in the Enneagram and diving into it, but there are 3 centers of intelligence. So there's 3 types that tend to be focused on the body, which is the 9 is very much in the body. And what can happen when you go to sleep to your needs and what you want to do and taking action on what you know you want to do is that you can start to develop a lot of tension and contraction in your body and we kind of sometimes forget we have bodies. That's another thing. And so exercise is super important. I know you have a hiking group that you lead. It's so helpful and valuable to be constantly engaging in your body because there's an intuitive knowing, a gut level knowing that's also characteristic of the body types. And when you go numb to the body, then you start to lose that ability, that gut level knowing as well. So that would be another way. I mean, there's just so many ways to apply that, but it's super important because if you're not taking care of yourself and you're not getting that exercise or tuning in, then it's hard for you to show up fully in your work.
That is so helpful. And I hope our listener is taking that in and thinking about how helpful going through this type of assessment can be to them in a variety of different ways. It's just remarkable how deep this goes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Lisa, having heard all of these benefits and having you go so much more deeply than I had ever been aware that this tool could be, I'm really excited about diving into this more myself and looking at a lot of these resources that you've provided. So thank you for providing all of these. As I said, I will put them in the show notes for our listener, and lots of great things to explore there between the books and online and the app. So really, thank you for filling us in on all of those.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you, Connie.
And I'd love to know now for your work, is there anything in particular that you're excited that you're working on right now in your profession with Renaissance Leader?
One of the things that I am super excited about introducing, I just went through some training on something called the Leadership Circle profile. And the Leadership Circle is, once again, a visual representation. It's a 360 leadership assessment, essentially. But it visually represents data. When someone goes through a 360, a lot of times it will be represented in graphs and bar charts and those kinds of things, and they'll get feedback, but it's kind of hard to see all the connections. And this particular assessment works with a lot of the different leadership and management thought leadership in this area, also incorporates the Enneagram. And so it talks about, really highlights how we are creative when we're really utilizing our leadership competencies and where we all fall as an individual on these leadership competencies, as well as the reactive tendencies that we tend to have that will really draw down on our ability to be creative. And what they found is that the majority of leaders, about 75% of them, are really operating out of the reactive mode, just reacting to this crisis or that crisis or this email or that phone call or this client issue or whatever. And really, once again, talking about ways of doing things differently for us to really solve some of these bigger issues and challenges in our workplaces, in our businesses, and especially in social causes, we need to really operate more out of the creative. And so it provides that measurement, and it really, in a visual representation, you can see, and you're getting feedback from other people, which it helps you see it within the visual as well. And so I'm really excited about this because a lot of the work that I do is that inner work, it kind of leading up to it, working with character strengths and core values and the Enneagram. And then everything comes to life within the leadership circle profile by getting some of the outer perspective, some of the outer input. So people aren't surprised that, oh my God, it's not that kind of reaction. It's like, oh yeah, I know that and I'm working on it. Yeah, I got that covered. Or, oh, this really helps me zero in. So anyway, I'm super excited, as you can probably tell from my voice. So.
Yes. Now, as you're describing that, I'm picturing it being really effective within an organization. Is that where you primarily do this, or is it something that you can also apply to the individual?
It's for people who are in leadership roles. They actually have a manager version as well, but I really do believe it helps us understand where we get hung up as well as where we can be even more creative. Whether you're a small business owner, it's going to help you drive your business because when you're operating out of the creative side, it really has been shown that we are much more highly effective and we have greater business performance. So it's clear. There's a clear correlation to that. And when we're operating out of the reactive, that's when it tends to hold back our businesses and we become less operational, less effective, less on the performance side. So yes, whether it's leaders within a small business, an executive team within a small organization, or even certainly there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies that are doing it across many of their executive teams or leadership teams across their organizations.
I can see that. I'm actually thinking of one of my clients who's running for public office in his county in Illinois and thinking, hopefully, if he wins, what a great tool for bringing his new team together. And and really seeing how effective they can become with using both the assessment and what arises out of the results.
It creates a platform to have those kinds of discussions too. And so that's one of the things that is really important in a developmental plan after you have this type of assessment done is to then get feedback, use it as a point of discussion. So I see that I'm challenged here or this seems to be an issue. What do you see and how can I work with that? What do you see me doing more of or less of or whatever? And so it opens up the discussion and it tends to remove some of the reactivity. You can look at it objectively a little bit.
Lisa, if someone would like to contact you about any of this work that you do, the leadership circle, the Enneagram work, what is the best way to contact you?
My website is renaissanceleader.com and my email would be lisa@renaissanceleader.com. So pretty easy and pretty simple, and there's a way to contact me on my website as well. But thank you so much for this opportunity. This has been so much fun.
Oh, good. Well, I'll be sure to post those on the show notes as well. So just be sure to go to smallbiz101podcast.com. Also, if you go to the podcast website, smallbiz101podcast.com, you may also leave your feedback and comments. Lisa and I would both be very interested in your perspective on what you thought about this topic, the Enneagram and its use in organizations and businesses and for small business owners. Lisa, thank you so much for your time here today.
Thank you, Connie. Appreciate it.
Continuing the series on finding the ideal small business for you, in upcoming shows, this podcast will be covering different types of business styles, sources of ideas for businesses, what types of businesses are all the rage now, and which ones may have passed their heyday, and how to determine if your business idea will be successful, if it's really viable. Thank you for being here. You've been listening to the Small Biz 101 podcast, the show for big dreamers about small business.
Thank you for listening to the Small Biz 101 podcast with your host, Connie Weitzel. For more information, visit smallbiz101podcast.com.